Hello again, everybody. I'm Joe Pryweller, Conference Director for Plastics News. I want to welcome you to this session of Ask the Expert, your chance to engage with professionals on a range of topics and to interact with questions. Today's Ask the Expert is sponsored by Shale Crescent USA. Our expert is Greg Kozera, Director of Marketing with Shale Crescent USA, and Joe Eddy, President and CEO of Enhanced Technologies. Greg and Joe will discuss a new study that compares major cost drivers for US-based plastics processors. They will answer your questions after the presentation. To submit a question, email pnevents@crane.com, or if you're watching along on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, submit your questions through those platforms. With that, I will turn things over to Greg Kozera of Shale Crescent USA and Joe Eddy of Enhanced Technologies. We'll kick it off with Greg. Greg, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joe. Good to be back with everybody. In the first two sessions we focused on profitability and reliability and some of the advantages to U.S. plastics processors. And just so everybody knows, Shale Crescent USA is a nonprofit research, marketing, and economic development organization. Our mission is to create jobs in the Shale Crescent region of Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. This morning, I want to give you a new term that you probably never heard. It's called green manufacturing. And green manufacturing, we've defined as making a product in the most sustainable way possible and still be profitable. And I can tell you what it's not. It's not taking crude oil from the Middle East, shipping it 7,000 miles on a tanker that burns pretty nasty fuel, then making a product and shipping it halfway around the world to the United States. And we're going to talk about that this morning. Matter of fact, I'll turn it over when I get done to Joe Eddy, former CEO of Eagle Manufacturing and an executive consultant, and he'll be able to really show you what this means to you as a processor. Next slide, please. Here's the change. We've gone, next slide, please. We've gone head to head with China in so many different ways. And we're going to talk about how we here in the United States can win. And our focus today is going to be really more on sustainability. Next slide, please. China's been eating our lunch for the last 20 years, and we can change that. Next slide. Since 2000, for over 20 years, our imports from China have been continuing to increase. And today, we're looking at $500 billion worth of imports a year. Now, that's a big deal in a lot of different ways, but next slide, please. And we're seeing that, overall, for the last, you go back to the beginning of this graph, $7 trillion in imports coming from China to the United States since 1985. Next slide. But what we've done is bigger than those imports and the jobs, because if you look at this graph, there's a direct correlation between emissions from China that have grown from 5.8 gigatons per year to 11.5. China has doubled their emissions in the last 20 years. And actually, those numbers are from 2005 to 2020. So that's actually happened in 15 years. Now, think about that. And that makes us really responsible for that, because if you think about that, as we've imported more, China's manufactured more, and their emissions have increased. Next slide, please. We showed this in a previous session, but what the real message I want to get across here is during the same period of time, in the last 15 years, while China doubled their emissions, the United States has cut their emissions from almost a million gigatons. That's huge. And in that same period of time, those same 15 years, particularly since 2010, thanks to the American energy industry, what we've done is we've increased manufacturing jobs. So we've shown that this country, we can increase jobs increase manufacturing, and at the same time, we can lower emissions. Next slide, please. And we know we're getting a lot of stuff from China, and all that has emissions associated with it. And like I said, when you're talking about green manufacturing, it's not just making something with, let's say, a solar energy or wind energy. And really, if you think about it, even if you chose to do that, if you're using windmills and solar panels that are manufactured using Middle East oil that had to go 7,000 miles, and if you're going to ship that same product halfway around the world, are you really green by using that windmill and solar panel, knowing that that's how it was made? Next slide, please. Because it's not exactly pristine. And when you start looking, matter of fact, a good friend of mine said, look at the global map. Look at the pollution work that's actually resulting from shipping all these products, shipping oil to, let's say, a place like China, but also shipping those products all the way across the Pacific Ocean to the United States. It's not a free lunch. Next slide. And here's a chart that Deloitte put together. But you can see what we're seeing is global GDP is going up, shipping volume is going up, and we know that's happening, and so are emissions associated with shipping. Next slide, please. And how do we fix that? Well, here's how we fix it. We eliminate all that transportation, and by green manufacturing, I'm talking about making products as close as possible to consumer, using energy as close as possible to where the manufacturing is. That's what really we're talking about. Building and locating manufacturing facilities close to customers that use those end products and close to their feedstock and close to the energy source. These are great opportunities, and you may be greener than what you think you are, particularly if you're selling products to people within a very short drive. Next slide. And so this is what we're looking at. On the left side, oil coming from the Middle East, going to Asia, Asian products then going halfway around the world to us. Look at those miles. We're talking about 24,000 miles versus about 500 when you make it in this region. And even if you made it someplace else in the United States, you're really cutting off a lot of those emissions. Next slide. And Walmart's recognized this. They've really got an initiative to promote and buy from U.S. manufacturers, and they're supporting it with a $350 billion investment. That's huge. And that's something that as processors, you can participate in. Next slide. And Joe, we're hearing a lot about ESG. So what can you tell us about what that means to processors, and where can they go from here?
Greg, thank you. And I want to say definitely thank you to Plastics News, and thank you to all the viewers that have continued to key into this. You know, this is our third session. Some of the things you'll see are what I would say reiterating or repeating, because we don't want to take for granted that everybody has seen this. If it's your first time, again, thank you for joining. Thank you, Plastics News, for providing such a great platform to be able to talk about opportunities. And I want to expand on that. Greg's talked a little bit about, a lot about what we can do for better sustainability. I want to continue that theme and talk about why, what has changed to make a more potential reliable supply chain. What has changed to help our corporate profitability. I know how important it is. Every penny that we can squeeze out of plastics processing is of utmost importance, especially today with high resin pricing. But also how to do all of that while at the same time meeting the requirements or our goals of sustainability, or what is becoming more and more common. I still have a lot of people asking, what is ESG? What does that really stand for? I mean, you can Google anything anymore, obviously. We put this up to kind of equate ESG. And I wanted to say, Greg's last slide was talking about Walmart making an investment of a significant investment, I think of $350 billion over 20 years to move purchases back, more local to make things more sustainable. We have the opportunity to delve into that, but I think there will be a cost. One of those things is going to be how they view our companies and our corporate cultures with ESG. How do we look at the planet? And how do we look at how we're treating people, the social aspects, the environmental aspects, and of course corporate governance. What do we do with our profits? Why are we wanting to be so profitable? So I think it's important as plastics processors to develop and implement sustainability strategies and practices, as well as engineering solutions to mitigate risks and to take advantage of opportunities. How are we going to be more socially responsible companies? So that's effectively what I wanted to touch on. With that, I want to talk about some of the things that have changed dramatically in the last 10 years, 20 years, and why we now today have great opportunities to create more reliable supply chains, as well as more profitable corporations that are making plastic and distributing plastic products, as well as improving our sustainability in the world. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the major things that's changed, I think we're all pretty well aware of the fact that there's been American Chemistry Council references $260 billion of investments either have already been made or planned for expansion projects and for new projects for making plastics and chemicals in the United States. A lot of those projects are already underway. And we still have some that haven't come online yet. One of the major ones that makes the biggest change is the Shale ethane cracker in Monaca, PA. Shell will come online in mid to late 2022. With that, they'll be producing 3.5 billion pounds of additional new polyresins into the Northeast markets that we really haven't had for many, many years. And so with that, that's one of the major changes. The thing that a lot of people say, well, why did Shell do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons economically, a lot of reasons commercially, where are your customers? But, I'm going to talk about the things that have changed in the energy industry, as well as manufacturing. But, with Shell and with the potential of the PTT Global Chemical Cracker, about 80 miles south of the Shell cracker in western PA, down in Belmont County, Ohio, for PTT, we could potentially be adding 6.5 to 8 billion pounds of additional resins to our plastics processing markets here within the next 5 years. Definitely Shell will come online within a year and a half, and that will make dramatic changes. Let's look at the next slide, please. Okay, so energy production, what's happened to it? Talk briefly about it here. We've had increasing energy production of oil and gas in the United States up through the peak of the industrial age and at the start of the Rust Belt, when things started. Energy production started reducing, so effectively did, and we'll look at this on another slide, manufacturing jobs in the United States. Leveled out, had somewhat of a decline until the beginning of the shale revolution in 2008. You can see what's happened to the U.S. oil and natural gas production equivalents up through the current. It's been quite a dramatic increase. Let's look at the next slide, please. Okay, this I like to always reference. Greg had the slide. If you look at the blue line, that's energy production in the United States since 1946. Really kicked off in the late 1880s with oil and natural gas increases. But the major part of the increase has been, you look at the jobs the manufacturing jobs peaked at about 20 million jobs in the late 70s. Oil and gas production leveled out somewhat until 2000. So did the manufacturing jobs, peaked and stayed about 18 million jobs. what happened in 2000, 2001? China joined the World Trade Organization. And with that, as we're all aware of, so did a lot of the manufacturing move to China and to Asian countries at that time. So we lost 6 million manufacturing jobs between 2000 and 2010, let's say. So with that, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means an opportunity for us, but we also, with the increase with the shale revolution, manufacturing and energy have really been tied from day one in this country. With the successes of energy, so have been the successes with manufacturing and growth. So you can see we've been able, as Greg noted, to add 1.4 million additional new jobs since the beginning of the energy revolution in 2010. So let's look at the next slide, and you'll get catch the drift of this. But energy has been a major importance, and where has that energy mostly come from? We've become a global energy leader as a country. We're now #1 oil and natural gas producer in the world. But Shale Crescent region of Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, if we were looked at specifically as a country of our own, we would be the #3 natural gas producer in the world, behind the rest of the United States without the Shale Crescent and Russia. And if you look, and I'll reference this, you can see the other top 10 countries, and referencing China is #7. So Shale Crescent is a very, very large producer now, again, have large reserves. We see this for the next 20, 30, 40 years, which is partially why Shell, it was easier for them to make a decision to build a $7, $8 billion plant in Monaca, PA. Let's go to the next slide. The other thing that's changed is the location of where the energy is produced in this country. Texas, Louisiana, offshore has been well known as one of the major energy producing regions of this country, effectively since Spindletop in 1902. Okay, we've had our production here in the Shale Crescent region, but prolific production from Texas, Louisiana has really been the norm. So what's changed with the shale revolution, with the prolific production from the Utica Shale in Ohio and the Marcellus Shale in West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, 85% of the growth of production of natural gas and natural gas liquids since 2008 has really come from the Shale Crescent region. That is of major importance. And again, what has changed? The location of the energy. That's also creating some major opportunities. We'll talk about that with the proximity slide that we cover here in a little bit. So let's move to the next slide. So how does that pair us up on a comparison? If we looked and remember the chart I showed you, we're #3 in the world as far as production now. If we were looked at as a country, how do we compare to China specifically, #7 in natural gas production? Well, the Shale Crescent region, on a comparison basis, China is 30 times larger land mass than the Shale Crescent region of Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So they're 30 times larger as a land mass, but we have twice that. Again, that's 2 times the natural gas and liquids production that China does. Gives us a great benefit as far as feedstock advantages. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, as I noted, manufacturing jobs follow oil and gas production. Okay, what happened here with manufacturing jobs when China entered the World Trade Organization? And when China entered the World Trade Organization, what happened to imports from China? Well, in 35 years, we've imported over $7 trillion of imports from China. Now averaging over, as Greg noted, over $500 million of imports per year. So with that, in the last 20 years, we've lost 6 million manufacturing jobs. They've moved offshore, China, and other Asian countries, because that's where most of the goods are being produced now. So what's the opportunity? I think here's really where we have our great big game changer. So let's look at the next slide. So manufacturing has always been of utmost importance for bringing the country out of any downturns. Manufacturing really, instead of just looking at it as one job or a loss of 6 million jobs since China entered the World Trade Organization, we should be looking at it in the way that it really is. And manufacturing jobs really throw off an additional 4.5 to 5 jobs created. Now, we know that. That's a National Association of Manufacturers statistic that's been tracked for many, many years. So 6 million soon equates to 30 million jobs. So with that, we have an opportunity not only to grow back manufacturing jobs, but also all of the support and service jobs that really support manufacturing jobs. So let's look at, that's why the value of manufacturing is so important to our country. I tell you, the last recession was a big one in 2007, 8, and 9. It took us forever to recover from that because we had so much less manufacturing jobs, which a norm was 18 months to recover from a deep recession, effectively was 8 to 10 years. So let's look at the next slide, please. We talk about opportunities with all of these things, and I'll focus a little bit more just for informational purposes on the inputs after we follow this up. But what has changed? The manufacturing cost index, when you throw all these things together, labor, electricity, natural gas, and a few other things, lease rates and things we'll talk about. So 20 years ago, my company, we looked at going to China and making some products as well, because we saw their labor rates were so low. They could make products 30% less than we could. All those things in the last 20 years, increases in labor rates, electricity rates for them, energy rates, natural gas, everything. Now we're back on to a manufacturing cost index comparison where the U.S. is within 3 to 5 points. The Boston Consulting Group shows 4-point differential, and that gap is still closing. We've had prolific productivity increases while at the same time, their labor rates have been increasing. So we've really come together, and our biggest advantage is the energy and the energy from natural gas, the energy from natural gas creating electricity, a lot of different things we'll follow up here in a minute on. But that is a key driver for our opportunity. Let's look at the next slide, please. Okay, the Boston Consulting Group talks about China. What they had at one time, a major cost advantage has eroded effectively, and mainly because they now have high energy costs. We have lower energy costs because of our prolific production. So let's consider that, and we'll look at what that really means as far as the annual increases in their wage rates and everything. Let's go to the next slide. What has happened to their labor rates? China's labor rates in the last 20 years have effectively doubled every 4 to 5 years, and for a total effective increase 10 times what it was 20 years ago. So you look at that and you look at this and say, wow, it's still pretty low, but our productivity increases have been so great here in the United States. We're still so much higher than they are that we now, as you saw on our manufacturing cost index, are so much tighter now with the ability to compete. And we actually have more opportunities as we'll look. Let's go to the next slide. So labor's one. Industrial electricity rates is another major. We'll use Ohio, right in the heart of the Shale Crescent as an example. Industrial electricity rates of 5.75 cents per kilowatt hour on a comparison to one of China's major manufacturing provinces at 9.5 cents. And most other provinces are higher. They're building a lot of coal-fired plants, which is another issue with sustainability and the environment, and we'll talk about that. But anyway, a major cost difference in electricity. And as you know, plastics processing especially, but manufacturing in general is a very, energy intensive industry. So we use a lot of electricity in manufacturing plastics products. So another big step forward for the United States. We've been able, and especially now with natural gas abundance, and so much turnover of electricity to natural gas generation that gives us a definite advantage into the long future. Let's look at the next slide, please. Okay, Ohio versus China and industrial lease rates. Another very important part, especially when you have such large platform space required to manufacture products, and no different for plastics processing. So rates in Ohio, where we're doing our comparisons in our studies, $4 to $5 per square foot per year. On a comparative in the Zhejiang province in China, $6 to $7, and in some instances, depending on location, a good bit more than that. So another definite benefit to Shale Crescent in the U.S. for bringing manufacturing back. Let's look at the next slide, please. U.S. plastics imports. We talked about the total imports from China being about a $500 billion per year now. Of that, 500 billion per year, 45 billion, and again, these are total imports into the United States of plastic. Total imports of $45 billion of plastic products that we could be making here are imported. And those are only products that reference 100% made out of plastic, not component parts or cars or things like that. These are products that are specifically made out of plastic. So 45 billion total. Of that 45 billion, no less than 60 to 65% of that is imported directly from China or other near Asian countries. So that is of significant, to me, opportunity. And with that, that effectively is why we have the best opportunity to move forward with increasing our market share. Let's look at the next slide, please. And again, why? What has changed? This has been building for many years. Market proximity. This is really one of the strongest reasons we have great opportunity to take back market share. A lot of those products Greg was talking about coming over the ocean on container ships and the issues with the environment and things that creates are coming here to supply U.S. markets. Now, one of the nicest things is we in the Shale Crescent are within a day's drive, what I would call market proximity benefit here, of 80% of the petrochemical demand in North America, 70% of the North American polyethylene demand, 77% of polypropylene demand, and within a day's drive of 50% of the U.S. population, as well as the major markets of Eastern Canada. So market proximity, as we all know, when you talk about real estate, location, we're right in the heart of it. The other thing that's going to be of major importance, we haven't dwelled on it, but it's something that is very important. Inland waterways for transportation base, but even more so for the use of the water. The Ohio River it runs through the entire heart of the Shale region. So when you're talking about large cracker plants, for example, that utilize a lot of fresh water for their processing, most manufacturing does use a good bit of water. So we also have a great fresh water supply with the Great Lakes, as well as the Ohio River running right through the heart of the Shale Crescent region. So that's something else to keep in mind, as well as transportation routes, roads, railroads, but waterways are of critical importance. Let's look at the next slide. So as CEOs, as CFOs, as business managers, profitability is still an important part of our business. So is sustainability and reliability. But the number one thing for being profitable is to be able to build on top of your feedstock, right in the middle of your energy supply, and right in the heart, right in the middle of the largest market in the world. Shale Crescent region is one of, if not the only place in the world where you can do this. Build on top of your feedstock and energy supply in the heart of your customers, the central proximity to your customers in the world. So let's look at the next slide, but don't let that fact get away from you. So what is the opportunity? What's the solution? we just talked about the opportunity. Obviously, the opportunity is gaining back market share. You know, we've all seen this at trade shows over the last 20 years. One booth growing to 10 booths, growing to 100 booths. Now where our Asian friends, mainly from China, are representing at least half of the trade show floor. We have an opportunity, if we just look at China and the competition with China, to bring back $28 billion worth of plastics manufacturing back to the United States. We have a lot of great reasons. That's our opportunity. What's the solution? Manufacturing products here. It addresses the reliability of the supply chain. It addresses the corporate governance and profitability. At the same time, in a major respect, addressing the sustainability and the ESG that we were talking about, being good corporate citizens. So should the U.S. and so should the world want to see us reduce all of those emissions that Greg was talking so much about. We could get rid of those, take it to zero by producing right here in the middle of the markets. So I'd like to turn it back over. As Joe Pryweller said at the beginning, we've been talking for 3 months now as Shale Crescent, talking about a soon to be released report that encompasses all of these things, as well as how to be more profitable. What are those specific products? Greg will talk more about how we're going to disseminate that report, when it will be available, what it might all include. So I'd like to turn it back over to Greg right now, Greg Kozera. And Greg, you can talk a little bit more about the report and really want to wrap this up for our third session. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next slide, please. Thanks, Jeff. And this is the new study that'll be coming out in the next several weeks, comparing the benefits to manufacturers of actually making things here as opposed to overseas. Next slide, please. So how do you reach us? There's our contact information. You can contact me directly. You can go to the website. There's free downloads of 4 other studies we've done. And you can, when this new study comes out, if you'll send me an email or reach us on the website, we'll make sure that you get a copy of it when it comes out. We don't charge for our services. Our goal is to bring jobs back to the region. And Joe Pryweller, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Greg and Joe. Terrific presentation, and really brought some compelling evidence on going with U.S. manufacturers, basically, and in the Shale Crescent region, especially. A few questions that have come in. Again, if you're interested in asking a question, you can send them to pnevents@crane.com, or if you're watching along on social media via LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, you can send your questions in through those platforms. First question that has come in came from a viewer on YouTube. How would I get specific information on narrowing down the best location and existing facilities for our company's operations within the Shale Crescent region?
I'd love to reach me by email. You can gkozera@shalecrescentusa.com. Go to our website. You can pick up some information there. But love to just visit with you, and we can share plenty of information that'll help you.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. We don't talk a lot about the makeup of Shale Crescent. Greg talks about us being a nonprofit. One of the interesting things about Shale Crescent USA is that our board of some 30 business professionals across many realms of specialties includes and incorporates site selection managers. And well, we really, we're not doing this as a commercial. We're really not trying. We're trying to show people what an opportunity really is here to locate, to expand. So we really want you to know the information. But we do have experts on our board, and that's effectively, you ask how specifically, contact Greg. Greg can put you in touch with experts. I mean, that's why I'm on the board. I'm considered one of the plastics experts because it's what I did for 25 years. So anyway, I think that's a point that needs to be covered. So
here's an interesting question. If the current administration in the U.S. impedes U.S. energy production, will this have a direct impact on our U.S. competitive advantage versus China?
It concerns us greatly, because that is our real, Joe articulated it very well, very small area of the U.S. creating a whole lot of energy. And if we give up that energy advantage, we could be back in the same situation we were in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where when we have to buy our energy from the Middle East and China's buying it from the Middle East, we've lost a huge part of our advantage. So that's a great question and a really great point. And really our message to the administration is look at the big picture. Don't just look at this one little piece of energy. Look at the process. And it's much better if you look at the whole process by bringing manufacturing here and making it here where the customers, consumers are. We can do a much better job to help the environment than buying energy from the Middle East again.
Yeah, Greg, great point. That's kind of the point I wanted to make. Is it's one thing to be corporately responsible as a company or socially responsible. It's another to be socially responsible as a country. So that would be, and as Greg and I talk about, it could have dramatic effects on everything, the environment, our quality of living. It will be of dramatic, Greg likes to say epic proportions, but it's serious. It will and could create many unintended consequences, I believe. I certainly hope that they're unintended. And I certainly hope that that's not something that they implement. Go ahead.
Matter of fact, to a point, Plastics News reported that the American Chemistry Council was concerned about a bill that's going through Congress now to have a moratorium on new, for instance, things like polyethylene plastics production. And, that certainly impacts our economy. It impacts jobs. It impacts what the processors would pay for resin. But more importantly, that is what creates this environmental catastrophe that they're trying to prevent, because all that would do, if you restrict production here, we drive it over to China along with the jobs. And we already saw when you drive more manufacturing back to China, what do? You create a whole lot more emissions than we'll ever create. So we really need to make sure that one doesn't go anywhere, because that kills everything.
Great. One last question, if you just want to answer quickly here. Question is, we mentioned that China has rising labor costs and wages and that kind of thing, and they're maybe trying to offset this right now through automation and use of that. Is that going to narrow the competitive gap and help them achieve some level of advantage over the U.S. through use of automation, or is that not really a concern?
Joe, that's a well-informed viewer that asked that question, I'm sure, because it's something we've been following in manufacturing for years. And again, if you look at labor rates, it's one thing. As they've increased, it's part of what drove productivity increases in the United States. So I would say that's a great offset of one of the things that unions have been good for. As wage rates increased, so has productivity increased without loss of jobs. I mean, we've proven that with my old business, Eagle Manufacturing, adding automation and adding jobs at the same time, because it gives you ability to grow. So I think at this point, the United States manufacturers are so far ahead in productivity gains over and above what China would do. It's going to take them some catch-up time effectively to automate and to really to offset what they have had many years is utilizing laborers, employees to offset the need for investments in additional automation equipment. So it will take them time, and I expect that they will continue to improve that. But I think we have a good 10 to 20 year advantage on them in that respect. Greg, do you have any comment on that?
No, I think you've nailed it, Joe.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you if either of you have any final parting words for our audience here about this and about the competitive advantage that we have in the United States.
I would like to make sure Greg has the final wrap up on this as Shale Crescent USA's marketing director, because I want to make sure that we give all of you we've tried giving you additional knowledge and information to help make decisions, but also to help us continue to educate our congressmen and senators and the people that will make policy decisions that could help or be to our detriment as we continue to move forward. We've made great advances. As I noted, our best opportunity is, and again, it sounds like a commercial, but it's a way we look at it. We have had so many great things happen with energy, that gives us the benefit for feedstocks. And I know pricing's high right now for all of us processors, but that will come back, normalize, and be of great benefit. And if we really care about the environment, and I think some of the best environmentalists are industrialists and energy folks, because we're the ones spending our time and thinking and money on it. But I think that gives us the best opportunity to be a more sustainable country as we move forward. And we can do more reliable supply chains and be more profitable as companies, which again is one of the things that we're all responsible for. Greg, I would definitely cover the key things that we have here in the Shale Crescent and what they should do as far as getting a copy of that study moving forward.
You can reach out to me, but here's what I really want to close with, folks, is I'll never forget my uncle told me, he was in Patton's Army in World War II, marching through Europe on his way to Berlin, marching past German tanks that were out of fuel. That's how important energy is to us as a nation. And my parents were part of that greatest generation. And even my mother was talking about what they did at home. And the United States did the impossible. When you look at all the tanks, all the Jeeps, all the ships that were and planes that were built for World War II, that was a major accomplishment. This country is capable of anything we choose. And the biggest challenge I think we have right now is the head challenge. I challenge every one of you on this call to look at things differently. What happened last year or 5 years ago, look ahead. I'm a high school soccer coach, so this is my little motivation. But we've been blessed with a whole lot of success. We won 5 state championships, 16 regional championships. And it wasn't because I'm this great coach or the rest of us. It's our kids believe it. And if we don't believe in our capabilities, if we don't believe that we're capable of taking back that leadership in manufacturing, that's a choice each one of us can make. And Joe, I appreciate what Plastics News is doing to give us this opportunity to get this message out. But we have each got to start by believing in ourselves, believing in our companies, believing in our country. And Shale Crescent's there to walk with you. We'll help you. You can reach out to us in any way, email, look at the website. But we're there to help you. We want to see you win, because when you win, guess what? America wins. We create a lot of great jobs. We got a lot of great young people that are looking to you folks to start. They're going to be there for you. They're going to be fine. But you got to believe. You got to take the bull by the horns. Let's get this. Let's really get this rolling, folks. Thank you.
Great. You got me excited and inspired there. That's great. I want to thank again Greg Kozera of Shale Crescent USA and Joe Eddy of Enhanced Technologies for sharing their insights. And we'll look forward to the coming study that's coming out. If you have added questions, you can email Greg at gkozera@shalecrescentusa.com or Joe at jceddy at Heritage Holdings LLC, .net.
Right.
Today's Ask the Expert session will be available for viewing on the events section of Plastics News website. I'm Joe Pryweller with Plastics News. We'll end with a short message from Shale Crescent USA, and we'll see you at a future Ask the Expert session.